You know that specific kind of silence?
Oh, yeah.
The digital silence when you're staring at a shared project folder online?
Right.
You can see the little colored cursor of your collaborator, but nothing is moving.
It's just sitting there.
Exactly. Nothing is being typed. The cursor is just blinking at you. Honestly, it feels like it's mocking you.
I know that feeling all too well.
That blinking cursor represents the exact moment a group project starts to fracture. So, welcome to today's deep dive. We are unpacking a really universal and often very stress-inducing experience, which is the dreaded group assignment.
And we have some really fascinating source material today.
We do. We're looking at notes and transcripts from an educational dialogue that breaks down a specific case study of a university marketing project that has just gone completely off the rails.
It's a fantastic window into a very modern kind of dread.
Yeah, our mission today is to explore the actual anatomy of group project panic, how miscommunication snowball, and the specific language we use to navigate these really high-pressure situations.
Because you are watching a blank page stay blank in real time, and we get to see the psychological mechanics of how that crisis builds.
And I want to make something clear right out of the gate for you, the listener. Yes, our source material follows university students. But make no mistake, the dynamics we are going to explore today carrying unequal weight on a team, missing deadlines that applies to you, whether you are prepping for a boardroom meeting or, managing a community project.
Absolutely. Human behavior under pressure is remarkably consistent. When accountability gets fractured across a group, the stress responses are just universal.
So let's set the stage here. We've got two diligent team members in our case study, Sarah and Leo.
Right.
And they are currently trapped in the high-stakes reality of unequal work distribution. The project is a major marketing assignment, and the clock is ticking incredibly loudly because the deadline is Friday at noon.
And to put that in context, it's currently Tuesday.
Wow, so only 3 days away.
Exactly. Friday is only 3 days away. The margin for error is effectively zero. But what really elevates the baseline anxiety here is that they just got a draft back from their professor.
Oh, right.
And the source notes it is covered in, quote, red marks.
Which changes everything about their mental state. I mean, they aren't just trying to finish a project now.
No, they're in triage mode.
Right. They're trying to salvage something they already know is severely flawed. It's this massive mountain of work, and they are starting from a place of deficit.
Precisely. The red marks trigger a very specific trauma response for high achievers. It shifts the brain out of a state of creative collaboration and into a state of threat management.
And in that heightened state of threat, we hit the core problem. The introduction section of this massive marketing plan is completely blank.
This empty space?
Yeah, and that section was assigned to their third partner, Mike.
Mike is the missing piece of the puzzle here, and Sarah has been actively trying to manage this.
She really has.
The source notes she made 3 separate communication attempts yesterday. First, she sent Mike a message on WhatsApp.
Casual.
Right. But when that didn't work, she escalated to 2 separate emails.
That progression is actually really fascinating from a behavioral standpoint.
It is.
Because moving from WhatsApp to email isn't just, trying different platforms. It is a psychological escalation.
Definitely.
WhatsApp is informal, it's conversational. Email is formal. Email is where you go when you start feeling the need to build a paper trail.
Because you sense the social contract of the team is breaking down.
Exactly. It's the digital equivalent of, crossing your arms. And what did Mike do?
He completely brushed her off.
Yeah. He replied to all of that escalating panic by simply saying he was too busy to talk.
Which is a brilliant defense mechanism, albeit a really destructive one.
Yeah.
By saying he is too busy, he effectively shuts down the communication loop.
Right.
While still maintaining this facade of productivity. But all it does is completely shift the emotional and practical burden onto Sarah and Leo.
And we see exactly how that burden lands on Leo. Because Mike's section was blank, Leo falls into what we could call the martyr trap.
Oh, the classic martyr trap.
He assumes no one else is going to do the necessary background work. So he stays up until 2:00 a.m. researching data himself.
He takes it upon himself to fill the void.
Right. And I want to pause on the vocabulary here, because staying up is a specific action the source highlights.
Yes, remaining awake past the usual bedtime to finish work.
Which directly causes the next day's exhaustion. And let's look at the actual mechanism of what Leo is doing there.
Yeah.
Choosing to stay up past a normal sleep window, specifically to compensate for someone else, is just disastrous for team dynamic.
It really is. When Leo stays up until 2:00 a.m., he's not just trading sleep for extra time. He is literally degrading his prefrontal cortex.
Which is the part of the brain that governs emotional regulation, right?
Exactly. Emotional regulation and complex problem solving. So by trying to fix the project, he is biologically compromising his ability to handle Mike with any sort of empathy the next day.
He is guaranteeing that the next day he will be exhausted, highly reactive, and operating entirely from a place of grievance.
And the source material captures this perfectly when Leo admits he is starting to experience genuine panic.
Yeah, panic.
And panic isn't just worry. It's defined here as a sudden, overwhelming fear or anxiety when a situation feels out of control. Leo has totally lost his agency.
It reminds me of a three-legged race.
A three-legged race.
Yes, you are tied to your partners. You are all trying to run toward the finish line together. But in a digital workspace, it's like a three-legged race where everyone's wearing blindfolds.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
You can feel the dead weight of your partner suddenly dragging you down,
Yeah.
but you can't see why they stopped running. And because you were blindfolded, your brain immediately fills that void with the worst possible assumption.
You assume malice. You assume they're just lazy.
Exactly.
The blindfold represents that digital barrier. When you lack context for why a teammate is failing, the fundamental human reaction is to view the situation through the lens of justice. The source highlights a very simple phrase Sarah uses to describe this. She says it is simply not fair.
Not fair. It's such a primal reaction.
It is.
Not fair isn't just about the word count or the workload.
Yeah.
It's the realization that the foundational rules of the tribe have been violated.
And that violation is magnified by the shadow of the deadline. In any professional or academic setting, that boundary is absolute.
It's the final moment. A task must be handed in, carrying negative consequences like lower marks if it's missed.
Right. When a deadline is approaching and a teammate goes dark, the psychological pressure cooker just whistles.
Okay, so we've diagnosed the symptoms. We've got Leo's degraded prefrontal cortex at 2:00 a.m., Sarah's escalating email paper trail, the panic, and this massive blank space where an introduction should be.
The perfect storm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Sarah and Leo finally reach a breaking point. They realize they cannot be a solo act anymore. They have to bravely confront Mike.
This is the critical pivot in the case study. They're moving from passive resentment, Leo seething in the dark, to active confrontation.
It is Tuesday. The clock is ticking. Friday noon is getting closer by the minute.
The tension is real.
So they get Mike on the phone. And I mean, I have to admit, when I was first looking at these notes, I was completely ready to write Mike off.
Oh, sure.
I had him pegged as the classic group project villain. The slacker who ghosts his team and plays video games while everyone else does the heavy lifting. But the source material throws us a massive curveball here.
It really does, because when Mike answers the phone, the illusion of the lazy slacker shatters pretty quickly.
Yeah.
He sounds completely exhausted. He openly admits he's been hard to reach. And then we get the big reveal about what is actually happening on the other side of that blindfold.
Right, Mike isn't just lazy. He is juggling 3 other rigorous university classes on top of a part-time job.
He is drowning in real-world responsibilities.
And then, the ultimate plot twist. Mike genuinely thought the deadline was next Monday.
Not this Friday.
Yeah, he was fully planning to sit down and write his entire section over the upcoming weekend.
This completely changes the complexion of the conflict. It shifts the entire narrative from one of malice to one of severe systemic overload and a critical miscommunication.
He was operating on a completely different timeline.
Exactly.
Now, I hear what you're saying about him juggling a lot, but let me push back on this a little.
Okay.
Because cognitive overload is very real, but being busy doesn't excuse ghosting your team.
Yeah.
When Sarah messaged him, he just said too busy.
Right.
Why does cognitive overload translate into silence instead of just saying, hey guys, I'm struggling, can you help?
That is the essential question. And it comes down to how the human brain processes shame and capacity under severe stress.
Okay.
The source material uses a very specific term for Mike's mental state here, which is overwhelmed. Now, we use that word casually all the time.
Constantly.
Right. But clinically, being overwhelmed is a strong emotion where someone has so much to do or so many emotions at once that they feel like they might break.
Like his engine is just running too hot.
Precisely. When a person is genuinely overwhelmed, the brain starts triaging threats. Because Mike mistakenly believed the deadline was next week, his brain categorized Sarah's messages as a non-immediate threat compared to his shift at work or his other classes.
Wow.
And the silence, the ghosting, is a classic freeze response. Admitting he is behind requires emotional energy he simply does not have, so avoidance becomes the only survival strategy.
That is fascinating. It totally flips the perspective.
Yeah.
It's so easy to villainize the person holding up the project,
Mm-hmm.
but when you hear the underlying mechanism, he's kind of a victim of having way too many plates spinning in the air at once.
Yes.
One plate slipped, he wrote down the wrong date in his calendar, and suddenly he's the bad guy dragging the team down.
If you are listening to this and you manage a team, this is your crucial red flag.
Oh, yeah.
When your most reliable people suddenly drop communication, your first instinct might be to crack the whip on the deadline or assume they've checked out. But Mike's case proves that sudden silence usually isn't laziness. It is a symptom of structural failure.
So understanding Mike's situation is great for empathy, but it doesn't change the concrete reality that the marketing project is still due in 3 days.
No, it doesn't.
And the introduction is still completely blank. The professor isn't going to care how many part-time hours Mike worked.
Which is where the source material transitions from analyzing the breakdown to exploring the resolution.
Right.
The question becomes, how do you pivot to a solution when everyone is stressed without the situation devolving into a toxic blaming argument?
Because I know if I had stayed up until 2:00 a.m. doing someone else's work, my degraded prefrontal cortex might not be feeling super generous.
Even with a good excuse.
Exactly. But the way Sarah and Leo handle this is actually a masterclass in accountability.
It starts with Mike's immediate reaction upon learning the true deadline. He doesn't get defensive. He doesn't double down on his too busy excuse.
He expresses immediate, genuine remorse.
Yes, he tells them he feels terrible and explicitly verbalizes that he doesn't want to let the team down.
That phrase, let someone down, is a huge turning point, which means failing to support people who are counting on you, or failing to do what you promised.
It is the language of accountability. By saying he doesn't want to let them down, Mike is acknowledging that he has failed to support the people counting on him. He is verbally re-signing the social contract of the team.
The same contract that Leo felt was broken the night before.
Precisely. And because Mike takes that ownership, Leo is able to respond with compromise instead of anger.
Which is huge.
This is the crucial moment of the whole case study. Leo acknowledges that Mike has a crazy busy schedule. He validates the stress, but he insists on forward momentum.
Right. He tells Mike, look, if you can't finish the final polished introduction immediately, can you at least give us a rough draft by tomorrow evening?
That is highly effective milestone management. Leo didn't demand perfection on an impossible timeline, which would have just pushed Mike back into a freeze response.
He made it manageable.
By breaking the intimidating task down into a realistic intermediate target, a rough draft, by tomorrow night, he gives Mike an achievable win.
And Mike steps up. He gives an immediate action plan. He promises to cancel his gym session for the night and stay in his room to write.
He is going to completely clear his schedule,
which the source defines as removing all other appointments or hobbies to create a big block of empty time to focus 100% on one important task.
Clearing your schedule is the ultimate act of prioritization. Mike is taking the scattered, triaged energy he had for his job and his other classes and funneling it entirely into honoring this new milestone.
He's stopping the bleeding. But Sarah doesn't just take his word for it, which I think is incredibly smart given the history here.
Trust, but verify.
Exactly. She comes in with a final safety net to make sure they actually cross the finish line. She schedules a brief Zoom meeting for tomorrow night to do a final check of the whole document together.
It's brilliant. She isn't just hoping for the best. She is establishing a clear mutual checkpoint. This prevents the digital bystander effect from happening again. By putting a specific Zoom meeting on the calendar, she ensures transparency. No one will be sitting in the dark, staring at a blinking cursor, wondering if the work is getting done.
So I want to pose a question directly to you, the listener. Think about your own digital workspaces, your shared documents, your chat channels.
Yeah.
How often do we let resentment build up silently in those spaces? How often are you fuming like Leo at 2:00 a.m., assuming the worst about your colleague, instead of just picking up the phone on a Tuesday afternoon to clarify expectations?
It is a profound realization. The entire crisis in this case study was incubated in the silence between Sarah's ignored WhatsApp message and that Tuesday phone call.
We always feel silence with our own anxieties.
Leo assumed Mike was lazy. Mike assumed he had an extra week. Both were wrong. But the silence made their assumptions feel like absolute facts.
And the moment they actually spoke, the reality was entirely different. They saved their project through early, honest communication.
They really did.
Recognizing when a colleague's communication suddenly drops off might not mean they don't care. It might mean they are overwhelmed. And before the panic sets in, it is always worth making absolutely sure that everyone is looking at the exact same deadline.
And you know, if we pull the lens back even further, this case study leaves us with a rather provocative thought to mull over.
Oh, what is that?
Well, we focus so heavily today on how Sarah and Leo handled the immense stress of picking up the slack. They were the heroes of the communication breakdown. But if we take a hard look at Mike's baseline situation...
Right, the 3 classes and the part-time job.
Exactly. Here's a person operating at such a high baseline of stress that a single calendar mix-up caused a total systemic collapse. It forces us to ask, are the modern systems of education, and by extension, are modern corporate cultures of constant hustle, setting people up to fail before the group project even begins?
Wow. Like, we applaud people for taking on impossible loads until they inevitably drop a plate.
Precisely. When being overwhelmed is no longer an exception, but the baseline state for so many people, are we just treating the symptoms of a broken system rather than curing the disease?
That is a heavy but incredibly necessary thought to leave on. Are we building teams in an environment that mathematically guarantees someone's going to drop the ball?
It's definitely something to think about.
It's something to explore the next time you find yourself staring at a screen, waiting for someone else's cursor to move. Because maybe they aren't ignoring you. Maybe they are just trying not to drown under a system that demands too much. And the only way you'll ever know is if you untie yourself from the blindfolded, 3-legged race for a second and just pick up the phone and ask.